Under the scorching Egyptian sun, the air shimmering with heat in the shadow of the Giza pyramids almost evaporated the beads of sweat running down archaeologist Rowena's forehead. The excavation site was quiet, with only a gentle breeze scattering the sand. Ephraim, the leader of the team, was reviewing the map once more. He had a feeling that they were on the brink of a significant discovery today. "We're going to find something today. I can feel it," said Rowena, moving through the dusty stones. "Rowena, we've been digging in this area for years. You feel like we're going to find something every day," Ephraim replied with a laugh, but even he had a sense of excitement this time. Rowena paused for a moment, carefully digging the ground with her trowel. A piece of stone emerged. It was different from the others. It had strange symbols on it. "Ephraim, look here," Rowena shouted, her heart pounding. Ephraim came over and examined the symbols on the stone. "These symbols, they don't look like Egyptian hieroglyphs or any other known language," he said in astonishment. "But this is something else." Rowena brought her flashlight closer to the symbols on the stone for a better look. "This looks like an ancient language, but different. It's like something extraterrestrial," she said, feeling her hands tremble. The team quickly continued digging. After several hours of intense work, they fully unearthed a massive door beneath the stone. The door was covered with symbols resembling star maps. Above the door was an inscription: "The Return of the Queens." This is incredible," Ephraim said in amazement. Where could this door lead? Rowena's mixture of excitement and fear made her heart race. "I don't know, but this inscription, it speaks of the return of the queens," she said. Ephraim and Rowena began to push the door open together. The door opened with a heavy creak, revealing a dark room inside. Rowena shone her flashlight into the room and saw a large stone tablet there. "This is unlike anything we've seen before," said Rowena excitedly. The symbols and strange shapes engraved on the tablet glowed dazzlingly. At that moment, the symbols engraved on the tablet began to glow. They seemed almost alive. Suddenly, the room vibrated violently, and the tablet started moving on its own, its symbols shining brighter and brighter. Rowena and Ephraim had to pull back, looking at each other in shock and fear. "What's happening?" whispered Rowena, averting her eyes from the bright light. Ephraim shook his head in confusion. "I have no idea, but this is not a good sign," he said. Just then, the symbols on the tablet suddenly flared up, filling the entire room with light. The glowing light moved as if it were alive, and a deep, ominous voice echoed from the walls. "We are awake," said the voice, in a deep and resonant tone. "We will return." Rowena and Ephraim looked at each other in fear. This voice was not human. Rowena's heart began to race. "Ephraim, we need to get out of here," she shouted. But it was too late. A wave of energy erupted from the tablet, throwing them both to the ground. They were dragged back, sliding on the floor. For a moment, everything went silent, but then a sound like the howling of the wind filled the room. The spirits of the queens, trapped for thousands of years, had been released from their confinement. Rowena struggled to her feet, blinking her eyes. This must be a trap," she said breathlessly. "We need to close the door, send them back." Ephraim also stood up, his head spinning, but he understood what Rowena meant. "You're right," he said, quickly running toward the door. But as they approached to close the door, an invisible force pushed them back. The tablet glowed again, and this time a stronger beam of light shot out. The light engulfed the entire room, shaking them. At that moment, 3 figures appeared right in front of the door. The queens, but they were not human. With their blue skin and dazzling adornments, it was as if they had come from another world. "Our world," said one of them, in a cold and mocking tone. "Our legacy. Now we will reclaim it." Rowena and Ephraim looked at each other in despair. "These queens, they are really from another world," said Rowena, her voice trembling with fear. "And now they've returned to rule over our world," added Ephraim, frowning. "How are we going to stop them?" One of the queens stepped towards Rowena. "If you cooperate with us, we will spare you," she said with a sly smile. "But if you resist, we will destroy this world along with you." Rowena looked at the queen with a mix of fear and determination. "We will not cooperate with you. This world is ours, and we won't let you have it," she said, her voice firm and defiant. The queen looked at Rowena with a mocking smile. "So be it," she said, "but you will not win this war." At that moment, Ephraim threw a piece of stone he had in his hand to distract the queen. The queen recoiled in surprise. Rowena quickly ran towards the door and tried with all her strength to close it. But suddenly, a powerful wave of energy knocked them to the ground again. "We need to get out," shouted Ephraim, lifting Rowena off the ground. "Right now, we need to get out of this place." They ran toward the barely open door, barely making it outside. As the sunlight greeted them, the other members of the excavation team looked at them in confusion. "What happened?" asked one archaeologist, eyes wide with fear. "The queens have awakened," Ephraim said, breathless. "The war has begun now." Rowena, looking into the distance, felt the hot desert wind hitting her face. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We have to defend the world, no matter the cost." This threat, emerging from the depths of Egypt, was a danger not just for Egypt but for the entire world. In the conference hall of Cairo University, scientists from various disciplines, military officials, and archaeologists waited in tense anticipation. The room buzzed with wild theories about the return of the Egyptian queens. Rowena, Ephraim, Cedric, and Tamsin were caught in the middle of this chaos. Worry etched deep lines on everyone's faces. "Tamsin, can you tell us more about these ancient spells?" Rowena asked, turning her eyes to the sorceress. "Is there anything we can use against the queens?" Tamsin thoughtfully flipped through an old book in her hands. "These spells are very dangerous and ancient. However, if we can control them, we might be able to balance the queen's energy. But using them in the modern world carries a huge risk," she said, lifting her gaze from the yellowed pages of the book. "Risk? How big of a risk?" Ephraim asked, his face a mix of curiosity and concern. "The spells manipulate energy, but they could also drain the energy of our world. If we make a mistake, it won't just be the queens who are destroyed, but ourselves as well," Tamsin explained, taking a deep breath. "But we don't have another option." Meanwhile, Cedric was focused on his computer screen. "What about technology? If we can power these spells with energy, we could make them stronger and more controlled," he said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "But we need to find the right frequency. At the wrong frequency, everything could explode." Rowena knew how dangerous Cedric's plan was, but they had no other choice. "This has to work," she said with determination. "We need to create a device that can break the queen's power by using both ancient magic and modern technology." After the tense atmosphere of the meeting room, they quickly got to work. While Tamsin worked on ancient spells, Cedric went to the lab with modern technology engineers to develop a new device. Everyone was racing against time. The queens could return to fulfill their threat at any moment. Late into the night, Cedric and his team finished the first prototype. The device was adorned with magical symbols and designed to blend the energy passing through it with ancient spells. Tamsin read an old incantation from her spellbook and activated the device. Suddenly, an energy wave appeared around the device. "It looks like it's working," Cedric said hesitantly. But at that moment, an unexpected energy burst from the device shook the entire laboratory. Cedric and the others fell to the ground. The device seemed to be out of control. "Cedric, what's happening?" Rowena shouted as she ran down the corridor. "The energy is much stronger than we anticipated," Cedric yelled. "We have to get it under control, or this could ruin everything." Tamsin quickly recited a spell to try and contain the device. But the power was more immense than even she could have predicted. "Cedric, we must stop it," she shouted, fear etched across her face. Cedric slammed the power button on the device, and the energy surge abruptly ceased. Everyone took a deep breath. "All right, we need to be more careful now," Cedric said, trying to calm himself. However, this setback only motivated the team further. Cedric and Tamsin worked through the night to figure out how to better combine magic and technology. Eventually, they managed to build a more stable version of the device. The next morning, it was time for the showdown on the red sands of Giza. The queens appeared in massive metallic armor and with energy weapons. Each one seemed to carry the wrath and fury of thousands of years. Rowena, Ephraim, Cedric, and Tamsin were all ready. Cedric unveiled the new device. "All right, this is it. We have to use this device at just the right moment," he said with determination. The leader of the queens stepped forward. "Humans, your resistance is futile. Submit to us, or you will all be destroyed," she declared, her voice echoing across the entire desert. Tamsin closed her eyes and began to mutter an ancient spell. Cedric activated the device. The symbols on the device began to glow and started absorbing the energy around it. The queens hesitated for a moment, sensing an unexpected threat.
"Now!"
Rowena shouted. "Tamsin, keep going." Tamsin spoke the final words of the spell, and suddenly, a powerful energy wave erupted from the device. The queens and their soldiers were caught off guard by the sudden attack. Their energy shields began to crack. Ephraim and the other soldiers launched an assault, focusing on the queen's vulnerable spots. The leader of the queens lunged forward with rage. "You cannot stand against us," she shouted, but the energy emitted by the device was weakening her magical powers. Cedric increased the power of the device. "One last move." Together, he shouted. Tamsin and Cedric poured the last of their energy into the device. A massive energy wave illuminated the entire desert, draining all the queens' powers. As the queens were left defenseless, their leader fell to the ground with a cry of pain. "This isn't over. We will return," she shouted, her eyes filled with hate and fury. Ephraim stood tall before the leader. "You will never conquer our world," he declared. The sandstorm in Giza had subsided, leaving a tense silence over the desert. The queens had retreated, but this did not mean the end of the battle. For Rowena, Ephraim, Cedric, and Tamsin, this was merely the beginning. They knew the queens would make one final, more devastating move. "The queens will come back," Rowena said, looking into the distance. "It's just a matter of time. But next time, we must be fully prepared." Cedric examined the new device in his hand. "This device isn't powerful enough. It might not work in the next battle," he said anxiously. "So, what can we do?" Ephraim asked. "How can we stop them completely?" Tamsin opened an ancient spellbook and began to speak. "The queen's source of power is connected to the energy of this world. To cut off their power completely, we need to destroy the source of the energy," she said. "But doing so could disrupt the energy balance of our world." "Is there no other way?" Rowena asked, approaching Tamsin with determination in her eyes. "If there's no other option, we must take this risk. If the world falls into their hands, everything will be over anyway." Tamsin took a deep breath. "All right then," she said. "There is a last resort ritual we can use. This ritual will sever the queen's connection to our world. But to do it, we need to seal the portals and perform the ritual simultaneously at 4 different pyramids." Ephraim immediately sprang into action. "All right, we need 4 different teams," he said. "Rowena and I will stay in Giza. Cedric and Tamsin, you'll lead the other teams. One team will go to Saqqara, another to Dashur, and the last team will go to Mitam." Cedric paused for a moment, both excited and anxious. "If we don't perform this ritual correctly, we're not only endangering ourselves but the entire world," he said. "But we have no other chance." Thus, the 4 teams set out for the different pyramids. Cedric and Tamsin led their teams to Saqqara and Dashur, each prepared to face the queen's return. But time was running short. The queens had already begun to move. At Saqqara, Cedric and his team were drawing magical symbols around the ancient portal. Cedric's hands trembled, but he continued to work with determination. "Is everyone ready?" he asked his team. Everyone nodded. In Dashur, Tamsin was reading the final words of the ritual from the spellbook. "The energy will rise," she said, her eyes shining as she recited the spell. "Everyone must be ready. If we make a mistake..." At that moment, a dark shadow appeared above the pyramids. The leader of the queens, in a massive astral form, loomed in the sky. "Humans, this is your last chance. You cannot match us," she shouted. Rowena approached Ephraim in Giza. "It's time. We need to start immediately," she said. Ephraim nodded, keeping his eyes on the Queen's leader. "Let's begin," he said, kneeling in front of the portal and placing his hands on the ground. "Everyone, wait for my signal." Cedric and Tamsin also began the ritual simultaneously. Tamsin mumbled the magical words quickly, while Cedric activated the device. Energy waves started to vibrate around the portals. The queens were forced to defend themselves against this sudden attack. However, the power of the portals pushed them back. In Giza, Rowena and Ephraim began reciting the final spell. Energy waves enveloped the entire desert. The queen's leader, furious, advanced, but the energy of the portal stopped her.
"Now."
All together, Ephraim shouted. Everyone recited the final words of the spell at the same time. Suddenly, a powerful energy wave erupted from all 4 portals. The queens screamed and retreated. The energy wave completely severed their connection. A burst of light exploded in the sky, and the queens vanished. Silence reigned over the desert. Finally, everyone took a deep breath. The queen's return had been prevented. Tamsin closed the spellbook and took a deep breath. "We did it, at least for now," she said, tired but happy. Cedric knelt beside the device. "Yes, but it cost us dearly," he said, looking at the surrounding debris and damaged equipment. "But in the end, the world is safe." Rowena and Ephraim looked at each other in Giza. "Is this the end?" Rowena asked, still catching her breath. Ephraim took a deep breath and looked into the distance. Maybe this is just the beginning," he said. But today, humanity won. That day, a great celebration took place in Giza and throughout Egypt. Humanity had resisted and won against the threat of the queens. But this victory had taught them much. They had learned that when science, technology, and ancient powers come together, nothing is impossible. Yet, they did not know that far away, in another corner of the universe, the queens were beginning to make new plans. This battle was over, but the story was far from finished. Greater adventures awaited humanity, and one day, the queens would return. I hope you had a good time. If you like my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.